As we celebrate Independence Day this week, we remember that one of our basic democratic freedoms is the right to vote. But what happens when that right is abused? Two Kansas Cityans have just been convicted of voter fraud. John and Clara Moratina of Gladstone pleaded guilty in Jackson County Court to illegally claiming a Kansas City address in order to vote for their nephew in a Missouri legislative district race. Their nephew is John Rizzo, who is now a Democratic state lawmaker. He won the Kansas City district race by, get this, just one vote. So the ballots of his aunt and uncle did tip the scales of his election. Rizzo's election opponent, Will Royster, said the charges show Rizzo should leave office. Is that going to happen, Dave?
No, I talked to Representative J.J. Rizzo as I reported the story last week, and he said no, he had no intention of resigning. He said, I have won re-election in an intervening campaign since the 2010 fraudulent election, so he thinks his seat has been validated in that sense, and there's no real procedure for ousting him from office. Remember, we don't know absolutely for sure that those two votes swung that election, Nick, because the vote is the ballot is secret. So, yes. And they never disclosed who they voted for. Now we can all, it's a pretty easy guess who they voted for and why. But so as a legal, practical matter, forcing him from office would be very difficult. And Will Royster, for all his disagreement with the outcome, has suggested he has no plans to run for that seat again. So it's going to stay the way it is.
One thing that surprised me about the story that you did write, though, that was amazing to me, that given how important voting is, was that the penalty was a fine of $250 for each of them, Scott.
And don't forget, they can't vote for the rest of their life.
Yeah, but I still thought, though, that there would be a higher penalty because we don't see election fraud that often.
Right, and let's be clear, John Moratina has pleaded guilty to voter fraud in federal court, and there he faces a 5-year sentence. Now, he won't get that, but I think that's the range of sentencing options. He will get some pretty intense punishment, you would think. It may be probation, but for a long time, the federal system is a little more upset about this than the local people are.
But I would only add, punishments are designed to be deterrents.
Okay.
And $250, and wow, you can't vote for the rest of your life, is hardly a deterrent, I would argue, to violating, and what you pointed out, Nick, and you're absolutely right, one of the sacred rights of this country, and that's the right to vote. $250, and they swayed, presumably, an election. And I think, and the federal level, of course, is much tougher, but on the county and state level, I think it should be much more severe than $250. I think that's a joke.
Now, does this give weight to those individuals like Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach in Kansas, and certainly Republicans in the state of Missouri who are looking for more stringent procedures at the polls, including voter ID in the case of Missouri, to say that there needs to be more precautions at the polls, Eric?
Yes, and they probably will make them poster children because, one, they're Democrats, and two, this is a Republican issue, and this is what Republicans have been saying all along, is voter fraud going on. So now this will give them a foundation in which to make their point. The voter ID, I think, probably wouldn't have made any difference if they had already established how they were going to do it. It wouldn't have made any difference. Their mindset was to do something illegal anyway, so they did it.